My name is Emily. I'm 34, and I work as a nurse at a hospital near the city. I spend my days caring for people who are sick, tired, or in pain. The hours are long, but I find purpose in helping others. I live alone in a small apartment above a bakery. The walls are thin, and I can hear the sounds of laughter and footsteps from below. My space is quiet, with old books on the shelf and tea always waiting for me in the kitchen. Life is simple, sometimes lonely, but it's safe. Then everything changed. It started with a name I'd never heard before. Daniel. A new doctor joined our hospital, and that's when the shift began. At first, I didn't think he'd notice me. I didn't think someone like him would pay attention to someone like me. Before that day, I had a routine. I worked my shifts. I went home. On weekends, I visited my father by the sea. He lives in a small town where the waves are slow and the air smells of salt. Since my mother passed 5 years ago, he's been alone. We don't say much to each other, but sitting near the water is enough. At work, my closest friend is Lily. She's loud, funny, and full of life. She always brings me an extra sandwich when I forget to eat. Her presence makes the long days feel a little lighter. Sometimes I wondered if this was all there was to life. No surprises, no big moments, just quiet days and long nights. But Daniel's arrival made me question that. He didn't come into my life like a storm. He came in like a question I wasn't ready to answer. It was a regular Tuesday when Daniel started at the hospital. He was the new doctor, and it was impossible not to notice him. Tall, confident, with a smile that put everyone at ease. At first I didn't think much of it. He was just another doctor. But soon I realized he wasn't like the others. He took the time to talk to me, to ask how my day was going. He brought me coffee and sat with me during breaks. Little things, but they mattered. Every day Daniel checked in with me. "How's your shift?" he'd ask, always smiling. I thought it was just friendly conversation at first. But there was something about the way he looked at me. Something that made me feel noticed, truly seen, not just another nurse in the crowd. One evening after work, he asked if I needed a ride home. I wasn't sure how to respond. I hadn't expected him to offer, but he seemed sincere. His smile made me feel at ease. So I said yes, and we drove in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward. It felt easy, natural, like I'd known him for much longer than I had. The next day, Daniel brought me coffee again. He sat beside me in the break room and said, "I enjoy talking to you. You make the day go by faster." I didn't know how to respond. He wasn't flirting, he was just being kind. But his kindness felt different. It made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Daniel and I began to talk more. Small things at first. Asking about my shift or if I needed coffee. But over time, it didn't feel like just casual conversation anymore. There was something more in the way he looked at me, something that made me feel like I mattered. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting shift, Daniel asked if I wanted to grab dinner. I didn't expect it, but I agreed. We went to a small cafe near the hospital. We didn't talk about work or anything heavy. Instead, we shared stories about our families, our childhoods, and what we did in our free time. When the meal ended, Daniel looked at me for a moment before speaking. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking. It's nice to talk to someone who really listens. It feels different with you." I wasn't sure what he meant, so I asked, "What do you mean by different?" He shrugged slightly, then smiled. "I don't know. It just feels easy with you, like I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not." His words caught me off guard. I didn't know how to respond. I smiled back, looking away, trying to hide the warmth that bloomed in my chest. The next day, Daniel was distant. He didn't bring me coffee, and when he passed me in the hallway, he barely smiled. Felt like something had shifted. That evening, as I was leaving work, I saw him standing by the door, looking lost in thought. I couldn't stand the silence any longer, so I walked up to him. "Daniel, what's going on?" I asked softly. He turned to me, his face tense. "I don't want to make things complicated," he said. "But I'm not sure if I can just walk away from this, whatever this is between us." I felt a lump in my throat. I didn't know what to say, but I knew I needed to hear the truth. The next few days were quiet, but the air between us felt heavy. Daniel seemed distant, as if something was weighing on him. I couldn't focus at work, knowing there was something unspoken between us. Then, a few days later, I ran into him in the hospital hallway. He looked surprised to see me and quickly glanced down, avoiding my eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but he beat me to it. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. "Maybe we need to talk. I don't want you to think I'm just leading you on." I didn't know what he meant, but I felt a tightness in my chest. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I'm married, Emily." His words hit me like a cold wave. I didn't know what to say. "You're married," I repeated, my heart sinking. He nodded, his face drawn. "Yes, I've been married for 5 years, but it hasn't been what I thought it would be. My wife and we just don't connect anymore. We've been living separate lives for a while now." I wanted to feel angry, but instead I felt a strange mix of confusion and sympathy. "Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked quietly. "I didn't know how," Daniel admitted. "I didn't want to hurt you. And I didn't want to make this more complicated than it already is." I stepped back, my mind swirling. "But if you're married, why spend time with me?" "Yes. Why bring me into this?" Daniel took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. "Because you make me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. When I'm with you, I feel alive." I didn't know how to respond. His words hung in the air, thick with tension. I was torn. Part of me wanted to walk away, to never speak to him again. But another part of me didn't want to let go. The days that followed Daniel's confession felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. He was married. Married. I repeated it in my head, but it didn't make sense. How could he want to be with me if he was still tied to someone else? I tried to focus at work, but my thoughts kept drifting. Every time I saw him, I felt a wave of confusion. His smile, his kind words, they felt different now. How could I trust him? How could I keep talking to him like nothing had changed? One evening, after another awkward interaction, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed a break, a moment to breathe. I called Lily, but she was busy, and I didn't want to burden her. So, I did something I hadn't done in months. I took a trip to my father's house by the sea. It was peaceful there. My father didn't say much, but his presence was enough. He handed me a cup of tea and sat with me in the living room, watching the waves roll in from the window. For the first time in days, I felt a sense of calm. I thought about everything Daniel had said. I thought about my own life. I wasn't someone who made rash decisions. I took my time with things, but now I wasn't sure. I needed to decide what I wanted. What was best for me? The next morning I went for a walk along the shore. The salty air filled my lungs, and I felt my mind begin to clear. I didn't have answers yet, but I knew I needed to find my own peace before I could make any decisions about Daniel. A few days after returning home, I got a message from an unknown number. "I think we should talk. My name is Rachel." I stared at the message, my hands cold, my stomach turning. It was Daniel's wife. I wasn't sure how to respond, but part of me felt like I owed her the chance to speak. We met at a small cafe near the hospital. She was tall and elegant, her clothes simple but composed. She didn't look angry. She looked tired, like someone who had cried too many times. "Emily?" she asked softly. He nodded. She sat down, hands resting on the table. She didn't speak right away, then said, "I found your name on Daniel's phone. I saw your messages. I wanted to hate you, but I don't." I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. "I believe you," she said, her voice calm. "I just needed to see who he was thinking about. Who he was smiling at when he came home late." I looked down, feeling both exposed and angry. I hadn't asked for any of this. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't mean to get involved." She sighed. "I know he's been unhappy. And I know I've made mistakes too. But I never thought he'd find someone else. After a few more minutes, she stood. I won't bother you again. I just wanted to look you in the eye. That's all. She gave a small, sad smile before walking away. I stayed in the cafe for a long time, staring out the window, wondering how my life had come to this. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at the hospital entrance, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Emily, he said softly. Can we talk? We stood in the parking lot, away from the noise. I know Rachel spoke to you, he began. I didn't expect her to, but I understand why she did. I said nothing. I just watched him. I've left, he said. I moved out last night. It's over. I've known for a long time my marriage wasn't working. I just didn't have the courage to end it until now. I looked at him but didn't feel relief. Just exhaustion. Why now? Yes. Because it got harder to hide. Because she found out, he said. But really, because I couldn't lie anymore. To her. To you. Or to myself. His voice cracked. And for a moment, I saw him as someone lost. Not as the man who had smiled at me every morning. I care about you, Emily, he said, his voice full of regret. I don't want to lose that. I felt the pull of my emotions, but I knew I had to be honest with myself. I need time, I said finally. And I need to know you're not just walking out of one life into another. He nodded. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know how I feel. I turned and walked away, unsure of what I wanted, but knowing that the silence would help me decide. Daniel didn't reach out again. He respected my space. And part of me was gone. But part of me felt grateful for it. The silence wasn't easy, but it gave me room to think. At work, things returned to normal. On the surface, anyway. But inside, I was still sorting through everything. I spoke to Lily about it all. She listened quietly and then said, You don't need someone who's half in. You need someone who chooses you fully, or not at all. Her words stuck with me. One morning I looked at the schedule board and saw Daniel's name was gone. He had transferred to another hospital. No goodbye. No message. Just an empty space where he used to be. I didn't cry. I just stood there, quietly breathing, feeling something shift inside me. That weekend, I visited my father by the sea again. We sat in silence, drinking tea. The wind was strong, but the view was calm. I felt a sense of peace settle inside me. And then I did something I'd always wanted to do. I signed up for an art class in the city. On my first day, I sat by the window with a brush in my hand, painting the sea. Lily came to visit afterward. She looked at my painting and smiled. You look different, she said. Like someone who finally picked herself. I smiled too, softly, quietly, but it was enough to know I had made the right choice.